I chased Jackson 35 times, and each time, I shattered my heart into pieces. In the dim light of the private room, he said he found me annoying. And everyone laughed. I just clenched my fists and forced a weak smile. In this life, I have been reborn once again, still the same silent, adoring fanboy. The system told me that as long as I could successfully win Jackson over, I could survive. But 34 failures and deaths had already ground my heart into ice. Tonight's cold laughter and his gentle gaze toward Emily were all etched into my soul. Perhaps this time, I should truly let go. I looked at the familiar private room and silently made my final decision. During the game, Jackson was asked about his feelings for me. He replied unhappily, "It's annoying. Really annoying." Everyone in the private room laughed. He tapped the table lightly and turned to me, saying, "I was just joking. You won't be upset, will you?" I wouldn't be upset, of course. I kept staring at him. Because Jackson is the person I love. I truly love him. But later, I grew tired of this relationship and decided to let go. To my surprise, he became very agitated, cornered me against the wall, and repeatedly asked me if I had ever truly loved him. Honestly, Jackson, how do you feel about the people who pursue you? It's pretty annoying. The lights in the KTV booth flickered on and off. Jackson tapped the table lightly with his fingers and answered decisively. The atmosphere suddenly grew quiet, and everyone turned to look at me. Their eyes were filled with complex emotions. Everyone knew I was the one who had persisted the longest among Jackson's many admirers. I chased him without dignity, and everyone called me a lapdog. When Jackson mentioned this person, everyone knew exactly who he was talking about. I clenched my fists and forced a smile. I chose to ignore their mockery because, just now, I had been reborn once again. This was my 35th life, and my last, as long as I could successfully win Jackson over. I could survive. However, I had already failed 34 times and died 34 times, because Jackson simply didn't like me. I still remember the 10th time I died. It was a rainy summer night. I was in his arms at the end of my life and asked him, "Jackson, would you die if you loved me just once?" His hand slipped out from under me, and he nodded coldly. Yes, at that moment, it felt like my heart was being squeezed tightly. Actually, I only had 10 chances after failing the mission. The system told me I couldn't return to my original world, but I could take on a new identity and continue living. However, I felt deeply resentful, so I struck a deal with the system. I would trade the rest of my life for the chance to win Jackson over. At the time, I thought that if I truly loved him, he would eventually notice my goodness. However, time and again, I endured pain in front of him, yet he remained completely indifferent. My heart felt as cold as stone, but this situation won't happen again. Soon, I'll be gone from his sight forever. I gathered my scattered thoughts, looked up at the smiles on everyone's faces in the private room, and was about to find an excuse to leave. Just then, a familiar voice interrupted me, Jackson. In the 34 cycles of death I had experienced, her voice had become a nightmare I couldn't escape. Even without looking up, I could recognize her. She was Emily, Jackson's childhood friend and his first love. He didn't seem to notice the awkwardness from earlier. Walking past me and quickly approaching Emily, his eyes filled with tenderness. "How did you come here?" Emily naturally placed her hand on Jackson's arm. The people around us immediately started whispering. Someone in the booth whistled playfully and shouted, "Jackson, who's this girl? We've never seen her before." "Shut up." Jackson's expression suddenly changed, and he spoke coldly. It was completely different from his usual indifferent demeanor. His sternness surprised everyone. Wow, this was the first time anyone had seen Jackson take something so seriously. The person who had spoken kept looking at me, his eyes filled with mockery. Though he didn't say a word, it felt like he was conveying a lot. Emily followed everyone's gaze and stared intently at my eyes, with a clear sense of ownership. I lowered my head, my smile almost breaking, and made up an excuse to leave. I suddenly remembered I hadn't fed my kitten yet. Everyone was having fun. So I'll go first. I leaned against the closed door of the private room and exhaled deeply. Laughter continued to drift out from the adjacent room. "Jackson? Lily has been pursuing you for so long. Are you really not interested at all? She looked pretty upset when she left just now." I heard Jackson respond softly. Amidst the noisy background, a pang of sadness welled up in my heart. Even though I had experienced this 34 times before, I still couldn't help but care. Then I heard someone ask, "What kind of girl does Jackson like?" The private room fell silent for a moment, And Jackson coldly replied, "Not someone like Lily." Everyone laughed again, and Emily teased in a soft voice. "Jackson, my mom asked you the other day when you're coming home for dinner." I bit my lip, got up to leave, and opened the ticket booking app on my phone. In the last month, I plan to leave this city and go to some places I've always wanted to visit, like Colorado. Ding, the notification that my ticket had been purchased was immediately covered by a new text message. I didn't expect it to be from Jackson. Thinking about it, this seemed to be the first time this had happened in the 35 cycles. "They said you look a little off, like you're not feeling well." I stared at the chat box for a while, not replying to him. Through the screen, I could almost see Jackson's expression, as if he didn't want to get close. Half an hour later, another new message appeared in my chat with Jackson. "Lily, don't ignore me on purpose. That won't work on me." The two messages sat silently on my phone screen, and I couldn't help but reflect on myself. Was it really worth it? Sacrificing my time and energy over and over again for Jackson. Emotions welled up inside me, and without thinking, I deleted both messages. Tears began to flow from the corners of my eyes, trickling down my cheeks and onto the pillow. Just 2 days before my departure, a friend who was about to get married invited me to her final bachelorette party. I thought about it for a long time but couldn't bring myself to refuse her. I'd treat it as our final farewell. After all, she was one of the few friends I had in this world. I didn't expect Jackson and Emily to be there as well. Jackson's gaze toward me was still quite cold. I didn't initiate a conversation with him, finding it pointless, and merely nodded slightly in greeting. He furrowed his brows, his eyes betraying some displeasure, but I didn't look at him again and stood up to go to the restroom. To my surprise, I encountered Emily there. Her face clearly showed hostility. "Lily, there was nothing to say between us." So I turned to leave. She reached out and blocked my path. Leaning against the doorframe with a dismissive smile, "I told you before, Jackson is mine, don't get close to him." I was confused by their behavior. If Jackson had feelings for her, and she liked him, why didn't they just be together? Instead, they were acting so openly in front of me. I replied calmly, "All right, do as you please." Emily's face showed a hint of surprise before turning angry. "Don't act so high and mighty. Everyone knows you've been clinging to him for years." I cut her off. "Do you have anything else to say?" She paused, staring at me for a moment before storming off angrily. I watched her back, silent for a while. Finally, I shook my head vigorously, trying to clear my mind of the jumbled thoughts. When I came out of the restroom, I saw Jackson leaning against the railing. I was about to pretend I didn't see him and walk away. Jackson called out to me, "Lily." I turned around and saw him holding a cigarette between his fingers. The delicate necklace around his neck swayed gently with his breath. I stood there, looking through the smoke, unusually silent. He impatiently extinguished the cigarette and came over to ask me, "Why did you hit Emily?" "What?" I was taken aback. Jackson gave a cold smile, his tone filled with disdain. "Don't play dumb in front of me, Lily. If you didn't hit her, how did the handprint appear on her face?" Hearing Jackson ask this, I suddenly felt there was no need to explain. "Think whatever you want. Believe whatever you want." "Lily," he grabbed my arm angrily. "Aren't you going to say anything?" What should I say? Should I vent my grievances or fiercely refute him? Always like this? It's really boring. Jackson saw that I wasn't speaking and thought I was embarrassed because he had exposed me. "I thought you wouldn't, and wouldn't take it out on innocent people." "Lily, I really misjudged you. Can you stop bothering me?" That made sense, as if I had come here tonight just for him. The emotions in my heart slowly faded away. And I looked at him leisurely. He frowned. "Why are you looking at me? Isn't that what you're doing? I saw you here, so I followed you." "Lily, please find something to do. Stop following me." His eyes were full of sarcasm, making me feel uncomfortable. That's right, I once lost some dignity chasing after him, but I'm not that kind of person. I pushed his hand away and said coldly, "Don't worry. I won't bother you again. No matter how you live your life or who you're with, I won't ask anymore." Maybe my tone was too cold, because Jackson's expression changed instantly. He felt a little uneasy, but he only pursed his lips slightly, showing no emotion on his face, and coldly said, "Is that so? That's really too bad." The argument between Jackson and me ended unpleasantly. As we parted, he looked at me, his eyes filled with unhidden annoyance. I pretended not to notice. There were only 2 days left before I left, so I needed to start packing. I looked around the room at the pile of things, most of which were related to Jackson. There were handwritten letters I hadn't sent yet, and old books we'd borrowed back and forth. There were even one or two gifts we'd exchanged. My gaze lingered on the box of thick letters. Inside were words I'd never spoken to him. I'd written them down, one word at a time, stubbornly believing that one day he'd be moved. I opened one of them and vaguely remembered the feelings I had when I wrote those words. Burn them. I moved everything to the backyard and built a small fire. The flames flickered in the darkness, giving off a warm glow. I felt colder and colder. As the fire burned down, only a small brown teddy bear remained. It was the only birthday gift Jackson had ever given me. Back then, our relationship was still good. "Hey, Lily, you just burned the gift your boyfriend gave you?" The neighbor happened to see me. I paused and said he wasn't my boyfriend. The neighbor lady was surprised and said, "Oh, how could he not be? I thought you two were a perfect match, a match made in heaven." I looked at the teddy bear in my hand and smiled bitterly. My thoughts returned to my 23rd birthday, when I was sent on a business trip by my company. That evening, I had just returned to the hotel when Jackson sent me a message. "Are you not at home?" "Yes. I'm on a business trip and won't be back until tomorrow." He didn't say anything else after that. The next day, when I returned home, there was a gift box at the entrance of the courtyard. Inside lay a small brown bear, cute and delicate. I immediately thought of Jackson and took a photo to send to him. "Did you send this?" He only replied with one word. "Yeah." 20 minutes later, he sent another message. "It's a free gift from a dessert shop. No one wanted it, so I sent it to you." I looked back at the little brown bear, feeling a bit complicated inside. I gently stroked it a few times, as if I had suddenly returned to that birthday. In the end, I threw it into the fire. Everything was already over. Since I had already decided to leave, the things left behind had no meaning. I woke up in the middle of the night because of stomach pain. The silver moonlight poured into the room, and I could even see the cold sweat on my pal Emtikes. I took a taxi to the hospital alone, just like many times before. At the corner of the hospital, Jackson was accompanying Emily as she received in Roman 4 drip. "Jackson, thank you." Emily looked at him gently, her eyes filled with a hint of spoiled affection. "It's all my fault. I got a fever in the middle of the night and didn't let Jackson rest properly. Now you have to accompany me to the hospital." Jackson lowered his eyes, saying little, but his tone was gentle. "Taking care of you is what I should do." Emily smiled and leaned her head against Jackson's shoulder. I held the report in my hand, standing a few steps away from them, and stopped in my tracks. Watching them so close together, I decided to turn and leave. Suddenly, Jackson seemed to sense something and looked over in my direction. In that instant, the tenderness in his eyes turned cold. He gave a faint smile and said, "Didn't I tell you not to disturb me? Why did you come back?" I glanced at them casually, holding my stomach in pain, unable to speak. Jackson saw me like this and paused. "Are you sick?" Just then, the nurse called my name, so I turned and walked into the infusion room. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw Jackson trying to grab my hand, but Emily held him firmly. But I didn't feel like confirming it. Tomorrow was my last day here. Today was the day before I left. In the morning, I went to the company to resign. When I handed in my resignation letter to HR, she looked at me with a hint of sadness and asked, "Lily, are you really leaving? Headquarters really values you." I smiled slightly and replied, "Yes, I just want to take a break." HR sighed and didn't say anything else. I didn't have much to pack, so I quickly gathered my things. Jackson stopped me downstairs at the company building. He looked at the box in my hands, and his expression changed. "You quit. What happened?" I didn't tell him the truth. There's no particular reason. I just suddenly felt like I didn't want to do it anymore. He looked at me disapprovingly, as if he wanted to say something, but ultimately kept it to himself. I waited for him for a long time, but he never spoke. I looked at him in confusion and asked, "Is there something else you need?" His eyes darted around, and he spoke hesitantly about what happened with Emily yesterday. "I misunderstood you." He lowered his head and whispered, "I'm sorry. Let me treat you to dinner. By the way, how's your stomach feeling?" I looked at the box in my hands and interrupted his concern, saying, "Forget it. What's there to talk about between us? Besides, didn't you want me to stay away from you?" Jackson was taken aback by my question, his expression growing complicated. I thought he was going to get upset again, but it doesn't matter. Whether he's angry or not has nothing to do with me. I shrugged and turned to leave. But he suddenly grabbed my arm, his tone softening. "Lily, let's talk. There's no need to keep this up." After a brief silence, I sighed. At first, when I was trying to get close to Jackson, it was just to complete a task, but later, I really fell for him. I even took risks time and again just to be with him. He was like the male lead in a movie. Suddenly appearing in my life, I thought I could easily win him over, but reality dealt me a harsh blow. Our relationship grew worse, and sometimes he wouldn't even speak to me. To this day, I can't even remember how many years I've been entangled with Jackson. I took a deep breath, as if drawing a line under those years of madness. I decided to tell Jackson the truth and leave. Jackson froze for a moment, turned to look at me, trying to find any signs that I was intentionally seeking attention. But when he saw the calm expression on my face and realized I wasn't joking, he felt a pang of sadness. I told you yesterday that I wouldn't pursue you anymore. I meant every word. Jackson, I'm truly sorry for the trouble I've caused you over the years. From now on, let's pretend we never met. That day, the sun was warm, shining into Jackson's amber eyes. He looked like he had a lot to say to me, but because of the awkwardness between us, he finally only asked, "When are you leaving?" "Tomorrow." Jackson didn't speak for a long time. It wasn't until the coffee in the cup had grown cold that I heard him speak again, his voice very low. "Tomorrow. I'll come to see you off," I nodded. Despite the rare warmth before our parting, I still felt a bit touched. He hadn't made many promises to me, and even fewer he kept. This time, he didn't keep his word either. The next morning, I dragged my suitcase to the airport, even when the announcement said I could board the plane. I didn't see that familiar figure. Maybe he was still taking care of Emily, who was sick. This outcome was actually expected, wasn't it? I saw on my phone screen that the deadline I had set for Jackson had already passed. Without any hesitation, I turned around and boarded the flight to Colorado. Suddenly, the cold, electronic voice of the system rang in my ears. "Hello. Your remaining time is almost up. The deletion command will be executed shortly." I froze. I still had a month left, didn't I? Because you have been depleting your life to obtain mission opportunities. You only have 2 minutes remaining. Before I could react, the plane suddenly crashed on the elevated highway. Jackson felt a sudden panic. He hurriedly slammed on the brakes, and the car came to a stop at the edge of the bridge, with cars honking incessantly around him. He stared blankly at the plane crashing in the sky above the airport, his mind in turmoil. Suddenly, his expression turned extremely painful. In the chaotic environment, Jackson held his head, and fragments of memories flooded his mind. "Is there anything you want to say?" At the moment the plane crashed, the cold program rarely showed a hint of mercy. "Is there anything you want to say?" I didn't know what to say at first. After thinking carefully, I realized I didn't belong here. I had lost my family long ago, and only had 1 or 2 friends by my side. My life seemed to exist solely for Jackson. Now that it was asking me my last words, I truly couldn't say anything. I had no one to entrust my final wishes to. So I simply shook my head calmly. No. Upon receiving my answer, the system acted without hesitation. I watched my body begin to slowly fade away, starting from my legs, then my torso and arms, until finally, the entire world grew blurry. On the elevated bridge, Jackson leaned against the driver's seat, his heart racing uncontrollably. After a long time, he finally calmed down. When he opened his eyes again, the corners of his eyes were red. The area where the plane had crashed was already cordoned off, and the bridge was gridlocked with vehicles. Through the car window, he looked ahead, his eyes filled with deep sorrow. He suddenly remembered everything. He remembered how I had clung to him time and time again, insisting that he be my boyfriend. He also remembered the disappointment and despair I felt each time he rejected me. Every time I left, I couldn't help but ask, "Jackson, do you really not like me?" I always ended it with a sense of regret in his cold gaze. Occasionally, when I was about to give up, he would briefly recall our past experiences, but then return to his original state. This cycle repeated itself over and over, each time the same, until the last time I died. He watched me go through it all again, and suddenly remembered everything. He felt an overwhelming pain and finally said to me, "Lily, find someone else to love." It wasn't worth it for his repeated failures. At that moment, seeing his expressionless face, I felt an emptiness in my heart. So I finally made up my mind and gave up completely. "Jackson, I don't plan to pursue you anymore." A bitter taste rose in his mouth. He blinked, struggling to hold back the tears at the corners of his eyes. "Actually, this is for the best. At least she won't have to face all those bad things in front of him every time." Jackson's heart ached constantly. Lily. Is it really worth it for me? Lily, you're making me start to waver. Next time, even if I don't remember, I won't force myself anymore. Don't do this anymore. He closed his eyes, and 2 tears slowly trickled down the corners of his eyes. He clenched the steering wheel tightly with both hands, but he waited for a very long time. Things didn't go back to the way they were before. He slowly opened his eyes, a look of confusion in them. A mechanical voice echoed in Jackson's mind. Are you still waiting to go back? There's no need to wait, she's already gone. The system told him a long story. The girl and the boy in the story originally came from different worlds. Due to an accident, she ended up in this world and met the boy. One day, a system appeared in her mind. The system told her that if she could win the boy's heart, she could return to the real world. She had 10 chances in total. The girl didn't take it seriously and spent her days completing tasks, until one day, she returned home exhausted. On the other side of the street, the boy appeared in the glow of the streetlight, suddenly coming into her view. He draped his jacket over his shoulders, walking with a light, lively step, full of youthful energy. When he saw the girl, a faint smile involuntarily spread across his face, just like the leading man in a movie. At that moment, the girl's heart was filled with nothing but him. Things grew increasingly complicated afterward. It wasn't until the 10th mission failed that the system told her she had failed. But she could still continue living, just unable to return to the real world. The girl looked at the boy's indifferent gaze and felt unwilling to accept her fate. She almost forced herself into a deal with the system, deciding to sacrifice her own life for one more chance. So she failed time and time again, facing one dilemma after another. Unfortunately, by the end, the girl had not achieved her goal. She no longer had the opportunity to try again. At the end of the story, the system summarized the situation for her. Jackson's eyes turned red, and the emotions he had just suppressed began to well up again. He felt regret, self-blame, and sadness, along with the love he had once ignored. Jackson couldn't figure out what state he was in now. He couldn't hold back any longer. His hands trembling, he pushed open the car door and stumbled toward the airport. The morning wind dried his tears, but the pain in his heart was indescribable. At that moment, Jackson was like a trapped beast, desperately needing someone to save him and help him escape this desperate situation. That person must be me, alive. Lily, are you stupid? I slowly opened my eyes in the darkness and found myself still in that familiar airport environment. Only, my body had become transparent. In reality, I hadn't truly disappeared. I looked at my own body and felt surprised. How am I still alive? The system sighed helplessly, revealing an uncommon emotion. It drew my attention to Jackson, who had lost his soul. Your task is complete, impossible, I replied without hesitation. How could that be? He never cared about me. Even after I endured so much pain in front of him, he didn't react at all. And wasn't he interested in Emily? Why would he suddenly develop feelings for me? There's no need to doubt it, you did it. It's just that it happened after you died. That's why you didn't completely disappear. My expression shifted from initial resolve to hesitation and surprise, and finally to disbelief. I wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words. I just felt that this moment was rather absurd. It was indeed absurd. When he was alive, he practically wanted to write "I hate Yao" on his face, but now that I'm dead, he says my mission was successful. Why? I looked at Jackson in confusion, unsure of what to think. From morning until night, Jackson still couldn't find my remains. Finally, he stepped out of the ruins, shook his head and decided to leave. He seemed to be muttering something under his breath. I listened carefully and heard him say, "As long as I haven't found your body." You're still alive, Lily, you're still alive. But deep down, he knew I was already dead. The system spoke in the silent environment. Follow him. Maybe you'll find the answers you're looking for. I saw a Jackson I had never seen before. The old him was cold and indifferent, as if no one could make him show his emotions easily. But now, he had gathered all the gifts I had given him before. These were things he had never cared about before. He sorted through them several times, then leaned against the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing out at the flickering lights of the skyscrapers. His expression dazed. I had never seen him look so lost. I looked at the boxes of gifts, hesitated for a moment, then decided to comfort him. It's okay? Jackson, what's lost is lost. I'm already gone. Live your life well. No one will bother you anymore. Unfortunately, he couldn't see me or hear what I was saying. In the dim light, I saw him take out his phone and open our old chat history. It was the chat history I had never had the courage to look at. It was filled with my endless waiting and pride. He flipped through it slowly until he reached April 30, 2023, and his finger paused. I said, "The stars tonight are so beautiful." He didn't respond. The stars outside the window were twinkling. And he looked up at the sky. "Is it the same tonight?" I didn't respond. He lit a cigarette, and in the smoke, I noticed tears streaming down the corners of his eyes. I remembered that he had smoked in front of me before, because Emily had come to ask me something. He scratched his head, looking dejected. In the past few days, we had gone to many places together. The old rooftop from university days, or the cafe at the corner of West City Street, all places that brought back memories. Finally, he parked the car in front of my house. Through the small fence, the neighbor aunt saw him. "Here to see Lily again," I said. Young couples always have their arguments. But Lily hasn't come back for days. I wonder where she went. Jackson moved his lips but ultimately didn't tell her I was no longer here. He looked at the pile of black ashes in the middle of the yard. Where some unburned fragments remained, he picked up a piece of brown fabric. "Lily, actually, that wasn't a gift from the dessert shop. Jackson had a friend buy it specially for me." That day, he waited from noon until nightfall, the entire afternoon, but didn't see me. He typed on the chat interface for 20 minutes but couldn't send the happy birthday message. In the end, he stubbornly said it was a free gift from the pastry shop. No one wanted it, so he'd give it to me. By his side, my fingers curled up, and I felt very complicated inside. "Jackson, are you home?" On the other side of the wall, Emily stood at the door, and Jackson was inside the house. When I came back home, Jackson had locked himself in his room. He didn't go out, didn't respond to anyone, and didn't answer the phone. I looked toward the door, and Emily was still waiting there. He should open the door. After all, he cares about Emily the most. To my surprise, Jackson was sitting quietly on the sofa, completely oblivious to the sounds outside. Finally, Emily barged in. Jackson lifted his head, recognized who it was, and lowered it again. "Jackson?" Emily's voice was trembling with tears. "What's so good about Lily that you haven't eaten or drunk anything for so many days and become so depressed?" "Actually, there are many people who care about you." Jackson sighed and said, "Emily, you might not understand." As he spoke, he pushed Emily out, looking tired and a bit disappointed. Emily broke free from his hand and cried, clinging tightly to his arm. "Who says I don't understand? I know better than anyone how it feels to love someone and have no hope. I just don't understand why you had to choose Lily." Why can't you look at me?" Emily cried, pouring out all the feelings she had been holding inside for years. "All these years, I've loved you. But why have you never once looked back at me?" She and Jackson had been childhood friends, and she had always had feelings for him. However, Jackson had always seen her as his little sister, like a real sister. All his care was out of brotherly duty. When she first saw me, she felt a hint of jealousy. Although Jackson never showed any special feelings toward me, and sometimes even seemed to dislike me, she could sense the special feelings I had for Jackson. She mocked me with cold sarcasm, trying to confirm her importance in Jackson's heart. In the end, she cried while looking at Jackson, hoping to see a glimmer of love or emotion in the eyes of the brother, who had always been kind to her since childhood. Unfortunately, there was nothing. Jackson was initially surprised, then grew awkward. He turned away and remained silent for a long time. "Emily, you can go now. You'll meet someone more suitable. When that time comes, I'll give you a red envelope as your older brother." The words were gentle, yet cold. At that moment, he seemed to have returned to the past. Even as Emily's makeup became disheveled from crying, Jackson did not offer a single word of explanation. Those who are sentimental always cause trouble for those who are indifferent. I stood by quietly, watching the entire scene unfold. After understanding what had happened, I gently touched my chest, feeling uneasy. I stared blankly at my own shadowy figure. Even ghosts feel pain. Beside me, Emily wiped the tears from her face and asked the final question. "Will you blame me? After all, it was I who stopped you that morning." "You never got to see Lily one last time." Her expression was serious, waiting firmly for an answer. She watched as Jackson slowly closed his eyes, as if hiding the pain in his heart. After a long wait, she finally heard his hoarse voice say, "A little." Emily left on a rainy afternoon, dragging her suitcase, without saying goodbye to anyone. "Am I going to keep living this uncertain life?" I asked the system. "Now, I can't truly leave. nor can I live a normal life. This makes me feel very lonely and a bit bored. The system paused for a moment, then told me the truth. He wants to see you one last time. I haven't agreed yet, let's see how things go first. I looked at the dejected man in front of me and hesitated for a long time. Hearing my own voice tremble, I said, let's go see him one last time. Don't let him stay stuck in this emotion. It was an autumn day when I stood in front of him. When he saw me, his originally cold gaze suddenly brightened, like sunlight shining through water. He wanted to say so much, but in the end, he couldn't bring himself to speak. I called his name. He turned away, unable to look at me. He whispered softly, I'm sorry. I smiled slightly and replied, saying that now doesn't matter. He hurriedly asked me if I had understood my own feelings sooner. Would the outcome have been different, perhaps, but none of that matters now. I didn't respond. In this game, it seems like everyone has issues, yet everyone feels they're in the right. He did take my life, simply because he didn't love me. I gradually lost my passion and hope for him. But I couldn't bring myself to truly hate him. Actually, it wasn't that simple at the beginning. I occasionally caused him some trouble. However, I've experienced 35 real brushes with death. And the pain of facing death is something I've felt more deeply than anyone else in this world. Emily has always been hostile toward me, often using underhanded tactics. However, she has never truly hurt me. Jackson waited for my answer, but his eyes began to grow dim. Lily, if I say I regret it now, would you come back? Come back and be with me, even if it's just for a short time? I froze. I no longer have the chance to go back. Even if I could, there would definitely be a price to pay. What did you tell him? Jackson's eyes darted around, avoiding mine, and he whispered, it's nothing. He wants to trade the rest of his life for something. At that moment, the system's voice echoed in my mind, cold and devoid of emotion. I froze for a moment, then looked at Jackson again, my expression complicated. Forget it, Jackson. Chasing after you all that time was exhausting, so I don't want to keep following you anymore. And most importantly, I no longer feel anything for you. Going back now would be pointless. I stared into his eyes, speaking slowly and clearly, making sure he heard every word. Jackson seemed to lose all his strength, taking a few steps back and leaning against the wall to steady himself. He looked at me, his eyes filled with sadness. So there's nothing I can do to change this? That's right, there's nothing you can do, I continued. During this time, I never really left. I saw all the regrets you had. But Jackson, I don't need you like this. I hope you live a happy life. After I said these words, my body began to slowly disappear. Once again, I felt that familiar suffocating sensation. I knew I was leaving. Jackson watched me gradually become transparent, and the sadness in his heart could no longer be contained. He stumbled toward me, trying to catch the disappearing me. But in the end, he couldn't. Finally, the headband on my head fell off, becoming the only thing I left behind in this world. Jackson went to Colorado alone. Carrying the headband I left behind. He rented a guest house, and from the clean windows, he could see the snow-capped mountains year-round. He walked through the meadows on the mountains, felt the breeze in the woods, and drank water by the streams. In Colorado, he met some locals who rode horses and herded sheep, living a carefree life. He even learned how to ride a horse. Jackson watched the sunrise and sunset every day, counting the days. One day, he packed his bags and set off on his snowy mountain journey. He never returned. Deep in the snow-covered mountains, he found a clean spot to sit down. Wildflowers bloomed all around him. He tied my hair ribbon around his wrist, gazed at the snow-capped mountains bathed in golden light, and silently made his final wish: to meet Lily again in his next life. Next time, I will never let her feel unhappy. Neither of us could have imagined that the words he spoke to me during my 10th perilous ordeal would become reality years later.